Now, in this company, we had a pretty dialed-in sales culture. It was brutal. It was one of these places where you either made it rain or you went and found another place to work. Great company, Fortune 200. Globally, we had 200,000 employees, but it was entrepreneurial. And I loved working there, and I loved the competition. And what we had to do every quarter was you would have to come in to a meeting. And in the meeting, they would have all the executives there, and they would have your boss there, and then all your peers would be there. And you had to walk in with a presentation, and you would tell them what you had done. Here's what I sold last quarter. Here I am against my goal. And then you would have to forecast the next quarter. And this wasn't any kind of forecast. This was a check that you were writing. You didn't bounce a check in this company. You say you're going to hit a number, you by God hit that number. You got about 2 strikes, and that was about it. And not only did you have to say, here's my forecast, you had to tell them the accounts that you were going to sell. Now, truthfully, most people didn't sell all the accounts that they put on their sheet at the beginning of the quarter, but you had to hit the number. So you had to walk in, and there'd be like all the people sitting there, and you'd have a PowerPoint presentation up like this, and you would go, I'm going to close this account, here's how much it's going to be. I'm going to close this account, here's how much it's going to be. And if it wasn't enough, somebody would call on you and say, hey, that's not quite enough. What do you got to do to get more in the pipe? Well, it was my turn to go, and I stood in front of the group, and I told them what I did, and I was all like, I'm the #1 salesperson in the country. And when I say #1 salesperson in the country, this is March. I literally could go to sleep and wake up the next year, and I'd be standing in Maui at President's Club collecting the trophy for the #1 person. There was no way that anybody possibly could outsell me. I get to the page where I'm doing my forecast, and as I pull it up, I see Bob. We'll pretend this is Bob right here, but y'all look alike. I see Bob. Bob's sitting in the front row, and he's starting to fidget. And then I start seeing his face get red. And then he stands up. Now, he's way taller than me. Bob's like 6'5", and big guy. And he stands up, and he says, what is that? And I went, that's my forecast. Now, I'm 24 years old, okay? So when you're 24 years old and you say that's my forecast, it's a little bit impetuous, right? So that's my forecast. And he goes, what do you mean that's your forecast? I said, that's my forecast. And he goes, you got to be effing kidding me. Back in the 90s, you could say that out loud. There wasn't HR. And I said, no. He said, this is unacceptable. I said, what do you mean it's unacceptable? I closed the biggest account in the company's history, Bob. I've been working really hard, Bob. I've been getting stuff done, Bob. I'm the #1 salesperson ever. Look how much I've sold. What do you mean it's unacceptable? I can't come in here and forecast something I don't have. I haven't had time to prospect. And he just looked at me. I mean, we've got like senior vice presidents. I mean, we're talking about the top brass in the company. He looked at me and said, here's the deal. You get that fixed in 1 quarter or you can't be on my team anymore. Now that's bold. Think about that. Think about telling the #1 salesperson in the company, you can't be on the team anymore. It hurt my feelings. But that's the kind of guy Bob was. Like Bob was he was like the greatest sales leader I ever had. But he wouldn't let you off the hook. And he was a courageous sales leader because he got this, he understood this. The pipe is life. You can't have somebody on your team that doesn't have a pipeline. It's not possible. You can't close a big deal and then go to sleep. It doesn't work that way in his world. So I had 90 days to fix my problem. And suddenly, I'm in the ranks of salespeople that are hanging out at the Feast or Famine amusement park, riding on the desperation roller coaster. If you've ever been here, you know what it's like. You're staring up that hill, you got an empty pipeline, you got to fix it. And let me tell y'all, I walked out of that meeting, I'm pissed off. I'm pissed off because I feel that I've just been insulted. I had a company car. I drove it right to the first gas station. I filled it up with premium just to spite those SOBs. I went home. I told my wife, I said, maybe I just need to find someplace else to work. Maybe they don't even appreciate it. They're just taking me for granted. Now, my wife is mean. And I say that with love. I've been married to her for 32 years, but she's mean. And I'm talking about quitting my job because they're mean to me, and she just looks at me and says, well, maybe you just need to go get on the phone. I got no love at work. I got no love at home. All right? Maybe you just need to go prospect. So I pulled myself together and I went back to the office. I got nothing. And I get on the phone, I pick the phone up and I start dialing. And I dial for about 10 minutes. I don't get anything from it. I go over to where the water cooler is, and I'm bitching, I'm moaning, I complain, and I cry about all the things, how I'm being treated bad. And then I go and make a few more calls, and I do it again. I go home that afternoon, I say, it's just not worth it. It's just not worth it. They're mean to me. And my wife says, just shut up and make the calls. And I go back the next day, and I do it again. And I got to tell you, it was hard. Like, it's really, really hard when you're at the bottom of the roller coaster, when you're sitting there looking up and you can't figure out how you're going to get there. But I did that. I would dial and then I would go read a book. I was reading Hank Trisler's No Bull Selling. I was reading Brian Tracy. I was reading Zig Ziglar. I was doing everything I could. See at the top became my best friend. I would dial for 10 minutes. I would read for 10 minutes. I'd dial for 10 minutes. I'd read for 10 minutes. And then a kind of a miracle happened. My people call it the sales gods, right? A bluebird flew through my window. One of our guys walked in and said, hey, there's a business down the street. I just talked to the CEO. They do business with Walmart. Walmart's coming in. Walmart's going to inspect their plant. They need some help. If you go down there, that dude's going to buy from you. I jumped in my car, drove down there, walked in the office, and sure enough, guys, I'm glad you're here. Where's the paper? Ink. I walked out the door, closed the first deal. And then went back to prospecting. And then I got lucky. Someone had called 2 weeks earlier, called me back and said, hey, I'm interested in working with you. And then I closed another one and closed another one and closed another one. By the end of the quarter, I'm the #1 salesperson in the region, not the company, but the region for that quarter. And I learned an incredible lesson. It was a lesson that stuck with me my entire life. It was a lesson that drove me later on in life to write Fanatical Prospecting, which has been like the Harry Potter of sales books. And that lesson is that the pipe is life. You cannot allow your pipe to be empty. And I made a pact with myself that I would never, ever be in that place again because it was a terrible place to be. I can't stand being on the desperation roller coaster. I hate the anxiety. I hate the stress. I don't like jumping out of airplanes. It's not fun. I also learned that the more people you talk with, like all prospecting is just having conversations, the more people you talk with, the more you're going to sell. I just picked up the phone and talked to people. I went out in the street and talked to people. That was back in the days when you had a field sales job, and I would just go knock on doors. I made a pact with myself during that period of time. I was going to make 100 prospecting dials every single day. Now, a lot of people hear that and they go, there's no way you can do that. Well, everybody on my team, my entire sales team, we make 100 dials a day. We do it in 3 hours. And so I just made a pact. I was going to make 100 dials a day every single day. If it took me till 10 o'clock at night, I was going to do it, and that's what I did. And the more people I talked to, the luckier I got. That year, I'm the #1 salesperson in the country. I go to Maui. The next year, I'm the #1 salesperson in the country. I go to Maui, and I got this figured out. You know, if you can prospect, you can make it rain. I also learned the value of something called the 30-day rule, and this is something you want to write down if you're taking notes and pay attention to this. The prospecting that you do in any given 30-day period has a tendency to pay off over the next 90 days. It was the understanding that prospecting is not quid pro quo, right? I prospect, therefore I have. No, I prospect now for advance. All success in sales is paid for in advance with prospecting. All success in sales is paid for in advance with grind and pain and hustle. All success in sales is paid for with hard work. And the 30-day rule simply says this. You take a month off of prospecting, you're probably going to be carrying your box of the car on your way to your next sales job. You take a week off, it's going to hurt you. You take a day off, it's going to hurt you. So the lesson here is that we prospect every day, every day, every day, every day, every single day. For me, that was $100 a day. Now, not everybody's like that, but every day. And even today in my life, I'm the CEO of a pretty large sales training company. I prospect every day. Now, I'm not doing $100 a day because I'm doing a lot of this, but I've got a list, and I run through my list every day. Here's the truth. The truth is this. And it's sad that companies hire me to do this. I'm glad they pay me to do this, but they pay me to tell salespeople the truth all over the world. The #1 reason for failure in sales, the #1 reason for failure in sales, let me say this one more time. The #1 reason for failure in sales is an empty pipeline. And the number one reason why you have an empty pipeline is that you are not prospecting every day, every day, every day, every day. That is it. That is the truth. And as Elvis said, the truth is like the sun. You can shut it out. You can pretend that it's not there. You can close your eyes, put a blindfold on, but it ain't going to go away. The number one reason for failure in sales is an empty pipeline, and it's always been that way, and it will always be that way. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please make sure to click like and subscribe so you never miss a single video. And if you want more sales training content, go to learn.salesgravy.com.